Hello, everybody. I am coming to you after we have just finished hosting our very first chronic illness therapist conference, and it was nothing short of amazing. And while this conference was just for health professionals, if you are not in the field and you're a patient, I have something really exciting for you coming up as well, which is a chronic illness summit. So this is going to be really geared towards food, diet, and the wellness culture trap around food and diet, and how those of us with chronic illnesses get really, really sucked in. And so we're going to have all sorts of really awesome speakers who really know their stuff and they have lived experience as well as professional experience. So that's going to be in fall of 2026. And if you don't want to wait to get support before then, my welcome to the waiting room membership is always open. You can join anytime. We have a sex and chronic pain support group every other Thursday, a general support group most Fridays, a monthly educational webinar, and a community wall where you can talk with others who also have conditions that are just complex and often hard to understand and come with very energy limiting symptoms like chronic fatigue and migraine and dizziness and IBS type symptoms and things like that. And for my therapist, the next chronic illness therapist conference is going to be in October of 2027, and we've already got tickets on sale for you now. This is the lowest that tickets are ever going to be, so I highly encourage you to book your ticket and let us know that you can't wait to be with us in October of next year. So this episode today is actually a replay of an episode that I did a couple years ago with Grace Quantock, and her book is now available in the United States, and so we are airing this episode for her in an effort to help spread the word about her wonderful book that was published at the time that we recorded this a couple years ago, but is now also publishing in the United States. So I hope you enjoy our talk today all about wellness culture BS and how to steer clear of it and do what's best for you when you're living in a chronically ill body. The Chronic Illness Therapist podcast is meant to be a place where people with chronic illnesses can come to feel heard, seen, and safe while listening to mental health therapists and other medical professionals talk about the realities of treating difficult conditions. This might be a new concept for you, one in which you never have to worry about someone inferring that it's all in your head. We dive deep into the human side of treating complex medical conditions and help you find professionals that leave you feeling hopeful for the future. I hope you love what you learned here, and please consider leaving a review or sharing this podcast with someone you love. This podcast is meant for educational purposes only. For specific questions related to your unique circumstances, please contact a licensed medical professional in your state of residence. Grace Quantock is an award-winning anti-oppressive psychotherapeutic counselor, writer, and advocate known for her work with marginalized individuals living with pain, illness, and trauma. She's the author of Living Well with Chronic Illness, Write Your Own Roadmap to Healing in Tough Times. And over the past 15 years, Grace has supported thousands through her therapeutic sessions, workshops, and writings aimed at dismantling oppressive health narratives in the UK. Featured in publications like The Guardian and The Times, and a recipient of the Curtis Brown Breakthrough Award, Grace's work continues to foster significant societal shifts. She's committed to helping her clients live well personally and collectively, advocating for a fairer world, and she loves gardening, calligraphy, and time with her rescue dogs. Hi, Grace.
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you? So I'd love for you to kind of tell people where you practice, what you're kind of working on at the moment. Do you do a lot of work with individual clients still? Or are you kind of mostly focusing on your book? What does your life look like right now in your career?
Okay, I love it. So such interesting and big questions. So, okay, I am based in Wales in the UK. So I practice in the UK, but I also see clients internationally as well. I am actually, we had new people join our clinical supervision group yesterday, as we had to kind of introduce ourselves to kind of new people in the group for the first time. And, people were introducing themselves based on like their qualifications, their modality, where they had trained. And it came to me and I was just like, yeah, how do I like conceptualize myself as a therapist? Like, is it based on like the year I qualified in the trainings? And like, actually it's not a lot. It's really based on kind of like what I'm wanting to work alongside or towards in the world. And I also really appreciate that, having some of those things can kind of ground and help us kind of have a shorthand to understand somebody's way of working potentially. So yeah, I'm a psychotherapeutic counselor, and I work a lot with. I talk about working with complexity in bodies and lives. That's not necessarily because you or I might term it complex, but it's people and experiences that are deemed complex. So it's, often kind of people have been, often told kind of like, we can't deal with X until you have Y sorted, or we can't talk to you until you finish chemo, or we can't do this until you have secure housing, and all of these things. And so that can be really, really tricky to actually, manage, especially for many of us. These complexities aren't temporary states. They are identities, they are the intersections of our ways of being in the world, or they are ongoing difficulties under the structural conditions we live in. So yeah, so that's kind of the work I'm doing. So at the moment, I work with clients one-on-one. I also teach workshops and classes online. I have a book that just came out last month, which is really exciting. So it is here, which is called Living Well with Chronic Illness: Write Your Own Roadmap to Healing in Tough Times. So that is available online. So it's published in the UK. We're working on, expanding it. And if people want to order from overseas, people often use Blackwell's bookstore because it has free shipping to the US. So yeah, we'll have all that. There's links.
Yeah.
Sorry, go
What was that website?
Blackwell's.
Blackwell's. Okay. Cool. Awesome. That's great. Yeah, what is it like to feel your physical book in your hands?
It's pretty surreal. I started writing it in 2011. So it is, a huge honor to kind of have it out in the world and actually have it as a physical object. And also, to see people's interaction and relationship and experience with it. It's a physical book. It's also a Kindle. It's also an audiobook. I also narrated the audiobook, which is a really lovely experience to have.
Wow.
Yeah, and to be able to do that, and the fantastic audio director Jordan completely adores my rescue with Wilfie, and kept campaigning for Wilfie to spend the entire day in the recording studio, which seems cute when he's really quiet, but isn't cute when he's doing zoomies. So you had to
Right.
really, that's not going to be a good idea long term.
No.
But
Oh,
he got more kind of confident, and I did actually go there because the book was also featured in the Daily Mail, which was exciting and interesting. And so we had to do like a photo shoot there with the book, and Wilfie came for the photo shoot, and then was actually in the Daily Mail. My focus should be on the fact that a book about chronic illness and trans rights and disability justice is in like a right-wing national newspaper, and my focus is entirely on the fact that my rescue pit was featured.
well, we got to make it palatable, right?
No sense of priority here at all. I know. Right? Listen, it was me in a pink dress with false eyelashes on, right? Yeah, but am I absolutely happy for people to like be reading this about maybe chronic illness or their difficulties, and actually through the course of the book be like, oh yes, there are arguments here about fat acceptance, about trans rights, about disability justice, about anti-racism, about addressing colonialism in our healthcare systems. So yes, 100% happy if people to kind of hopefully go through that process in the book.
How did you get an interview with the Daily Mail, and how did you yeah, with it being so kind of counter to what they might usually post or talk about?
So no, it was through the publicist and the publisher, and I think they offered them like an excerpt from the book, and they're talking about. They're really interested in one bit of it actually. They're really interested in the bit where I talked about, often when we're chronically undisabled, we can struggle with like household tasks because a lot of our homes aren't adapted. And so I talked about one of the things that, if you have the resources or support, you can potentially access things like a robot vacuum or adapted kind of household facilities potentially. One of the things that is often still really, really tricky is making beds. Like there isn't a robot that makes beds that we know of, they're still really, really hard. And so actually in the book I say, I have at times just given up and just used a rotation of sleeping bags, and I then wash the sleeping bags and then dry them and use them. And you can even get double sleeping bags if you have a partner and want to sleep in the same sleeping bag. And they just got really into that. And we're like, that's like, why doesn't everybody do that? Why do any of us bother? But that's a really interesting question to me because, what makes us look at the standards of normality in life, so what we call kind of quote unquote normality, what is like proper, who sets those and when do we get to question them? And I do find that sometimes within illness, because we can't meet a lot of those standards, it can be an opportunity potentially to question them and to actually go, well, do I want to be meeting that? Is that even my standard? I've been brought up with it, I've been acculturated to it, but do I actually want to continue it? And, one of the big things I kind of try and focus on is the idea that we're all interdependent and interconnected, and we really stigmatize different types of help, as you'll know. So, using a wheelchair, a device with four wheels that assists you, is seen as kind of, who would want that? People will go to huge efforts to kind of stop you starting to use one because of the stigma and the idea that it will be forever and that even that forever is a bad thing. But using a buggy for a child is fine, or using a car, also a device with four wheels, to get where you can't walk is actually, it's efficient, it's capitalist, it's getting you there faster, it's the right thing to do. And like if you need help with cooking because you're doing a really complex recipe and you're getting advice from like YouTube, that's fine. But if you need help because you can't hold the bowl, well then you're burdened and then there's a problem. And so it's kind of just interrogating some of these things that we absorbed.
That's so fascinating. I mean, I've never thought about it, especially the car example. Like, yeah, it's so fascinating. What is your book a workbook or is it a read, just like reading?
So it's read, but it has journaling exercises in it. So it does take you through a process, and you actually, I suppose it's more like, it's not done as a workbook, it's done as a guidebook. So it helps you to create your own healing roadmap. So the idea is, instead of absorbing plans or guides or ways our lives, our days should look from other people, or being told by like a hospital, this is the guide for you, and that doesn't fit your life or your needs because I haven't taken account the fact that you're a carer, or the fact that you also have schizophrenia and they're only focusing on your arthritis or whatever it is. So we talk about actually developing your own bespoke healing plan. And as much as we can have a plan, but really the idea is you start with, all the kind of shoulds we carry and that are stuck on us and that we're told. I actually did a list the other day of all the things I am supposed to do in my morning and evening routines, and it was 86 tasks.
Oh God.
It's just like, yeah, there's a reason that I cannot do it perfectly. And so what you would do is you kind of dump all these things down. And it's also great because then whenever anybody tells you, like, there's this special new treatment, have you seen it? It costs a gazillion billion pounds, but you should totally do it. And if you don't do it, then maybe you're just malingering and perhaps you just like being sick. So what you can say is you can go, that's really great. I'm going to include it in my healing plan. And where you include it is the mind dump. And then you just don't look at it again.
I love that. This is a sentiment that is going to ring true with so many people.
Well, I really hope so. Yeah. So we do the healing plan, and then we call it the healing, and then we also do your healing passport. So that is what the chapter was originally called, a guide to the care and feeding of you. So it's writing down, like, we can forget how we kind of take care of ourselves. We can forget what we need to do for our own well-being, as well as needing to be able to tell other people what we need. So obviously giving instructions about what you need, like the support you need for your healing roadmap, can be really tricky, can be difficult. So we put it all down, but it can also be a reminder for you. So say you're having a flare and somebody's there wanting to support you and you can't really articulate what you need, they can just look it up in your passport, you can share it. Or you can look in your passport and you can go, oh yeah, I take that drug at this time. I forgot I had that one because actually I haven't had this type of flare for like 4 months now. So I kind of, oh yeah, that was the thing that worked last time. Okay. And then you can go and do it. We say, what if you had somebody compassionate who had capacity and could give you like 40 minutes to an hour of their time, and they could help you in that moment, what would you ask them to do? Okay, so how do we get that set up so that you have that available even if that person isn't there? Then we can hopefully give it to yourself. Obviously, we wish they were there. But if they're not there, it's, well, what can we kind of set up ahead of time?
Yeah. What how can we talk a little bit more about this idea of if you don't want to like try the next treatment or do the next thing, then you must want to be sick?
Oh my goodness. It's so insidious. It's so under pressure. And a lot of people I have worked with, and myself, have autoimmune conditions, or conditions that perhaps are invisible disabilities, or perhaps are more complex or less understood or less researched. And sometimes people, and this isn't talking about clients, this is generally kind of people in chronic illness community, will say, why don't people understand it? Why don't people treat us as, take us as seriously as they do at blank? And they would say people have heart attacks or spinal cord injury survivors. And it's like, no, when you actually, because I've worked with people from across different illness and impairment spectrums, and I was shocked at the beginning to speak to friends with spinal cord injury who were being pressured to walk again. And I was like, I'm sorry, forgive my ignorance here. I really don't get it. You literally have a spinal cord injury. I don't get it. How are they? But did they actually understand humans? How are they pressuring you to walk again? But of course, there's the pressure to go to rehab again. There's the pressure to fly and have stem cell treatment. There's the pressure to do very risky surgeries. There's huge pressure. And sometimes, often what people end up doing is getting to the point of saying, and this is for any illness, that trying to recover or walk again or be normal, whatever it is harming me, is costing me so much. It's taking away from whatever I actually want to do with my life, which might be their work, or might be their art, or might be lying and eating bonbons, or whatever they fancy. That's up to them. And so, but there's this, huge pressure to either be doing it or to be performing doing it. And performing, like I was on another podcast actually, and we were talking a little bit about this, and the host kind of had said, and I can say this because obviously it's a public podcast, and the host had said something like, I couldn't do it, but I reassured them, I am trying to walk again. I said, really, don't have to. It's okay. You don't have to it doesn't matter. It's you don't have to reassure people that I need this access, but I'm trying to not need it, because it's okay. We have the Equalities Act 2010, the American Disabilities Act. You just have the legal right to this. It's not a moral. It is a moral issue, but it shouldn't have to be a moral issue. It's just in the moment. I mean, again, we don't see people going okay, you and I are wearing glasses right now. I'm wearing glasses right now, but I'm really trying. I'm eating my carrots. And is it carrots?
Oh, and you want to know what's funny? When I was in middle school is when I got glasses, and I literally was like, okay, I didn't eat enough carrots growing up. I got to start eating more carrots. And I did. I was like, this is temporary. I'm not going to need glasses forever. Of course, you get used to it, and you're like, oh my God, there's nothing wrong with wearing glasses. But it is true. Any type of aid is you did something wrong here.
I find that such a pressure to me for the body and for humans, this idea that, we are supposed to make ourselves infallible, and that if we don't, we have erred in some way, or that we have neglected ourselves, or that we have transgressed in some way, and that in doing that, we've, marked ourselves differently, or we've caused a problem in some way. It's just, that's a lot of pressure on what is a very fragile human form. It's it's a lot to expect. It's impossible. And of course, at some point, if we live long enough, we reach the point where we have the intersection then of ableism and aging and ageism, and the difficulties there of the dismissal or the minimization. And of course, we also have lots of elders who maybe don't identify as disabled, because for them their impairment has come as a part of age, and so they experience it as an age-related difficulty, but they then perhaps don't access the support they may need or the rights they may be entitled to, because the word disability is still so stigmatized, and it's so, and often people will, I also do board work, so I sit in public life, so that means I sit on boards like of a hospital and a social care regulator, so I do this kind of board work. We're talking about disability access and increasing disability support for hospital staff and wider communities. And, people were talking about what in the UK is called reasonable adjustments. So when you kind of need like an access, you ask for reasonable adjustments. And I said, but we don't tend to call them reasonable adjustments anymore. I said, that's what everyone calls them. I said, yeah. But really, every policy in a workplace is a reasonable policy. We don't call it the reasonable transport policy or the reasonable expense or the reasonable stationery policy. But actually, if I say, I'd like you to order 2,000 fountain pens in my favorite color, then you would say, Grace, that's not really reasonable. So it's all reasonable, but we only say reasonable for the disability access part. That's because it's quoted in the Act. But, what I find then is it trips people up and they say, well, is this a reasonable request? Is my request reasonable? I think it's reasonable because you asked for it. You asked for 14 helicopters, we'll come back to it. But like, it's reasonable because you need it. That makes it reasonable. And
yeah,
so we tend to say
reasonable, we call it reasonable accommodations. And yeah, it's reasonable for, it's not reasonable as in what your employer kind of deems reasonable. It's something that can't be, one, it can't, yeah, if we ask for 14 helicopters to, a small business, that would put them out of business. They can't do that. But it's also what just allows you to do the job like somebody else who doesn't have the same disability or same whatever it is, even if it's not considered a disability per se, like by our laws. If there's like again, just like brain fog with any kind of condition or ADHD, like brain fog, right? Then we might need more training, or we might you got managers who are like, I've already told you this, or like we need to do that training every quarter or like something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And here at least it's, so for example, I went to the station pre-COVID, I went to the stationery shop to get a journal, and all the journals were upstairs and the lift was out of order. So they can't kind of magic the lift into order. It should be in order, but it wasn't. They can't kind of magic me upstairs but what they did was they brought a stack of journals downstairs that I could pick from. So ideally, did I want to go and kind of calmly browse the journal aisles and make my own choice? Because, I'm a therapist, the journal I have is very important and I'm really careful about my journal choices. Yeah, that would have been ideal. But, it's not necessarily a like for like match with what you get, but you get access to something. But again, as you say, it's not about what other people deem reasonable. And generally, I actually experience that we often underplay our needs, not overstate them. The problem is that none of us are asking for enough access. Not saying had I said that, but alongside that, there was news out today or yesterday that one of our shadow ministers, Kelly Badenoch, has said that she believes that mental health conditions like autism and anxiety, I don't think she has appreciated that autism is considered a neurodevelopmental condition rather than a mental health condition, but we won't expect such nuance at this, but we do, but yeah. And has actually said that people are expecting businesses and society to reframe around them, whereas it used to be a personal issue that you worked on your own and used it to understand your own brain. And she's comparing it to the protections that people might experience around their gender. And honestly, actually, what's really puzzled me about it is, but they're included under the Equalities Act and Disability. So they are protected characteristics, because similar to the other protected characteristics that are listed under the Equalities Act. So I'm actually very confused about what she's arguing. But but that's that's great that we are making things more accessible for neurodivergent people like myself. This is brilliant. This is what we would like. We would like to have a more neurodivergently accessible world. We would like to have a world in which we are doing less things that activate people with anxiety. That is a good thing, rather than the idea that, as this happens again with accommodations, that when we have an accommodation, it shows that it's not our job to do this, but it does potentially show that such things are possible, that other people may also be able to request them, that it is possible in the world, that we are able to do this, and have rights to this access. We're able to do what we need to do when we get the access we need. And I think that's a good thing.
I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, I think, and there's also like so much research around positive thinking and how it like helps you fare better in most of it's in the cancer research, but it's so interesting because I'm like, is it positive thinking or do these people have their needs met? Do they have a better support system? Do they have um, you know, better healthcare? Do they have access? Do they have accommodations at their workplace that don't make life harder for them? Do they have accommodations in their home that make life easier for them while they're going through a really hard thing? That all contributes. And then you come in with this, researcher that says, oh, let me talk to you about your thoughts and how you're thinking. And like the ones who have positive thoughts are doing better. It's like,
It's so difficult. And like again, and we have a whole section on this in the book around what I call, compulsive miracle cure culture and bootstrap wellness narrative. Okay, wait for a second. So these pressured ideas that you can individually think your way forward, that you can, think yourself well, and the pressure to do that, and how difficult, how much people, kind of going back to what we said earlier, how much people can get blamed if they are not doing what is considered to be this way forward. And as you said, so just kind of to summarize kind of the terms I'm using. So for me, the bootstrap wellness narrative is a really individualistic, perfectionist, capitalist approach to healing. And it tells us that we can, and we should, heal alone. And if we put in this kind of mythical amount of effort, if we try, then we can live a quote unquote normal life. But just to say, it invisibly, silently assumes that we all have access to the same resources like wealth and transport and safe housing and competent medical care. And so it invisibilizes and ignores all the systemic inequalities. And what you notice if you see it is it will often draw on makeover stories where suffering is long past. And it it says, if I can do it, you can do it.
yeah.
No, that doesn't I'm sorry, I do not see the correlation that make any sense. And then we have the compulsive miracle cure culture, which tells us we should always be searching for a cure. And if we aren't performing that search sufficiently, then as we say, we don't want to get well. And so we're being blamed simultaneously, becoming ill in the first place. And then we get into this kind of wellness, self-help area of like positive thinking or law of attraction, which can lead to people blaming ourselves for our suffering, which is often the result of massively complex interplays of genetic and biological, environmental, and multiple circumstances. It has a huge amount of complexity in it. But, the research you mentioned on positive thinking, what I'm always really aware of is, from my understanding of it, these are people who are thinking positively, right? We may not know why they are thinking positively, but they are. These are not people who are desperately trying to overlay their genuine anxieties and fear with positive affirmations that they are trying to beat themselves over the head with, because they are trying to create a self-introject and desperately trying to program themselves into positivity.
Right.
Because it just doesn't work.
Right.
And unfortunately, because if we could just think happy thoughts and that made everything work, then I would be the first person on the street corner handing out the one-line sentence of how we all cure ourselves. And
Right.
as you said, often it's about access to resources and having time.
Is this what you were kind of just saying too, is that some people just are naturally do think a little bit like lean more positive?
I mean, there is some research that talks about, when we're infants in utero, that the impact of the pregnant person as they were pregnant, their kind of experience and the kind of hormones that happen at different developmental stages. There is some research that suggests that if the pregnant person had a a more difficult time or more of their own difficulty at that time, that potentially sensitizes some of our brains and our way of thinking towards more of the anxious thoughts or the kind of painful thoughts. That some people do seem to be more sensitized towards that from birth biologically. And then of course we've got, intergenerational trauma and kind of family patterns that show up. I guess more I'm thinking that whereas I can't necessarily say why people are thinking positively, I think what we can say is that the research isn't about people who are desperately trying to think positively and struggling with it. It's about people who are thinking positively.
Right.
So, I don't know, I'm trying to think, like, if getting up and I'm making this up, if getting up and weightlifting is healthy and you find that people who do that are healthy, that's great. But if I try and do that and I can't do it because I have hypermobility and my kind of joints fall out of place when I lift heavy things, then as much as I try and do it, I won't have the same outcomes as the people in the study, because the study wasn't about people with hypermobility who were who were struggling and not managing to do weightlifting. It was about people who can do weightlifting. Now we can argue why they can and I can't, but the outcome that we're basing it on is something very different. So as much as I try to get myself into there, what I could instead do is look at what kind of exercise can I do that works with my body, and how can I find one that's sustainable and workable and enjoyable for me. And that's the kind of thing we're doing in the book, instead of looking at like, I'm supposed to be doing affirmations and thinking positively and I better just stop doing that. Instead we're going, right, well, like, what is your reality? Where are you? What is happening in life, and how do we meet that? Can we ameliorate? Can we offset any of the difficulty? Maybe we can't, but can we? Can we try a bit, some of it?
Right.
What can we do alongside it? But it's about starting with us rather than starting with other people's, because there's kind of the aesthetic of what the very white, thin, het, cis, hearing, middle class, etc., aesthetic of wellness that we're kind of supposed to want to live into. And it's asking, well, that, what your idea of wellness might look like you playing video games all day. Great. If that's what works for you, great. You don't have to wear matching sets and drink green juice.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Wellness. And we just really do, we forget so much about how much our happiness plays into wellness. And so if you're doing things that are making you happy, that contributes to your wellness. And it's funny because people talk about stress. They talk about like stress is the new smoking and blah, blah, blah. But then it's like, okay, so to stop being stressed, you need to do, and you get your 86, to-do list around how to de-stress your life. And it's like, maybe you just need to play some more video games. I don't know. Maybe.
What if it's like that? And again, and I think we're talking about along the same theme of the idea of forcing ourselves into the performance or the aesthetic of wellness in the hope that it will have the results, when actually perhaps for you something very different will have those results. And years ago, I went to like a raw food potluck. So because I was like, was still in kind of compulsive medical cure and was really, really, it's a long time ago now, I was really, really trying to heal. And a man there found out that I was doing, I was kind of very, very, very early on in training at the time, because many, many years ago. And then he started talking about his dreams, which I guess is not ideal. But he, so somebody had found out there that I'm disabled, and then it was fascinating. So they all came one at a time. It was almost like they queued up, but they didn't. It was just kind of like random. And I sat next to me, questioned me about my diet and my lifestyle, and they'd each go, that's your problem. You need to eat more seaweed. And they solved me, so then they could go, because then they'd actually scared about illness or death anymore, because they'd solved me. It was okay. And the next person came up and they go, you're eating too much seaweed. That's your problem. And they'd solved me and go, but then this guy came up and he was saying to me, I keep having this, and I'm saying, because he's just a guy at a party, he's not my client or anything. He kept having a repetitive dream of just stuffing his mouth full of hot buttered toast. And what did I think it meant? Now, bear in mind, he spent the previous 40 minutes telling me how he makes tea by putting a glass of water on the windowsill with a tea bag in it and leaving it for days, so the sun brews the tea, so that it's not with boiling. You come across this, but not with boiling water, because that would hurt the head. I just said that, and I said, I think you need to eat some toast, mate. But you do not. like like honestly, that it was such an that's why I tell it, it's such an encapsulation of this kind of huge focus on health and really very orthorexic and also very using a lot of appropriated kind of herbs and practices, way of thinking. I just thought, honestly, like, I'm not, I'm Syriac, I'm not really into toast, but it sounds like you would love it. And I just thought it sounds like it probably makes you really happy. But you keep angrily chewing that kind of salad if you want to. That's if that's what you think will work. But again, I think we're often I'm laughing, but I feel like we're often under a lot of pressure here. So, people will come to me and kind of say, I keep getting told to do meditation. Everyone is supposed to do meditation. And meditation isn't for everybody. So, for some people, if we have dissociation, meditation can be very dysregulating. If we have intrusive thoughts, meditation can be very ungrounding. If we have, if you hear voices or see visions, meditation can be very destabilizing. And, sometimes people are, I'm making up an example here, like then maybe somebody who is sent to like a local meditation class, and the poor person leading the meditation class is like a fitness instructor who went on a 2-day mindfulness course. And then they've got somebody who goes, oh, when I lie down and close my eyes, I have these intrusive thoughts. Are they memories? Did this happen to me? I don't know what to do about it. And the poor person has no way of knowing how to cope with that because they just got sent on this 2-day course. And now they're kind of trying to serve the public. But this is a public in which we have like huge amounts of both non-recent and current abuse that is happening, of trauma, of medical abuse, medical trauma, of huge amounts of pain and suffering. And so that is going to start to emerge for people at times, potentially maybe when you have a lie down leisure centre on the meditation mat. And so, the other thing that does happen, I think, is people sometimes who aren't quite ready for therapy, and not therapies for everybody, but we'll end up circling therapeutic activities like writing, craft classes, yoga classes, art classes, things that are therapeutic activities, but trying to get what we need from them, but not being able to because they're not tailored to us and they're not able to meet us and they're not individualistic. But the difficulty for other people is that somebody might speak something because it's come up for them. So then you can end up getting re-traumatized at the group because their trauma story ends up coming out even when they didn't mean it to.
Yeah.
Really tough.
Yeah. You can pass on this question, but are you open to talking about some of your journey? I also have a very complex journey with like healing culture and trying to find a cure. And I'm just now starting to talk about all that. And so I'm just curious I'm curious what your personal wellness plan is now that if you're on the other side of that, what that actually looks like, and then maybe like how you got there.
Okay. So I don't give details of my specific plan only because I don't want it to become another aspirational thing for people. And it's really easy for that to happen. And because honestly, not that I think it's happened to any of your listeners, because I'm sure your listeners are wonderful people who completely understand this, but generally, as a disabled woman who works partially online, if I say anything about any of my healthcare plans, I will immediately have 100,000 reply guys. So maybe telling me why I'm wrong and why I need to do it differently. And with
that's the part of your plan is keeping yourself safe. It's not talking about these specific things in order to, not let people get in your head about, or just, enter your energy or your space. Yeah.
Exactly. And, like, honestly, kind of, I'm not trying to gatekeep anything. Like, I've talked to people individually. Like I talk to friends. It's not some kind of massive state secret. I don't have the cure.
Yeah.
You can probably tell that by the fact that I'm still pretty sick. But it's, as you say, it's more about keeping myself safe, and kind of navigating that. So in terms of, kind of how I got here, I mean, I can remember the one day reading an article, like I think I was quite sick and I was like having like I was having like a 10-minute kind of like reading some kind of gentle stuff online that I'd saved, and then I was going to kind of rest and nap again. And it was something like the morning routines of people. Because when I was a teenager, I used to like those articles, and back when I actually had magazines of like what's in your handbag. Like I always found this really fascinating. And of course, they probably weren't what was actually in their handbag because they didn't have like, I don't know, used like receipts or whatever else that was stuffed in there. They were always very kind of
neat and
considered.
organized and yeah.
Very, very kind of neat. When I've gone through my handbag, I've been amazed. I think I'm amazed. God gracious, how much I've been carrying around here. I thought I'd lost that. There we go, it's still there. And of course, I carry so many bags. To the person, I have so much stuff with me at all times. I can never enter a room gracefully. I enter a room with like huge amounts of luggage at all times. And at the moment, with like a dog as well, and everything is just like, and my HEPA filter that I carry, and my mask, and all of this. It's just there's no. I actually have, because I had to do, for something, if I had to be mask off, we have a huge HEPA filter, which is like the size of like a radiator, like half a wall. It's really, really big. So I told people, like, if I had to have like a dental procedure or something, where if they don't have match, my dentist is very good, they do have
Yeah.
version. But I was like, I say I'll bring it, and people always think I mean a little one, and I have to say no. I'm saying this is not discreet. It is not mindful. It is not demure. It is not discreet. It is literally like it's like the size of half, like a quarter of a wall. It's big. Okay, it's going to take up space. We all just have to just manage your expectations. It's not going to be like a coffee cup. It's huge. But anyway, I was reading these morning routines, and as I was going through them, I was mentally ticking up. I was going, right, I do that, like okay, I do the lemon water, right? I do yoga, I do meditation. Okay, I do that. Oh, I don't do that one. Oh dear, maybe I should. Okay, I got to the end, and I thought, you realize that you're competing against 10 different morning routines from 10 different people, and you want to do the summation of all of them.
Right.
You think that's realistic?
Right.
And of course, so
it comes from this such desire. You hear somebody say, like, this changed my life. And you're like, wait, I want to change my life. And then you try something and it doesn't change your life. And I'm like, oh, that must not be the right one then. But maybe I'm just not doing it right. Maybe I haven't tried long enough or hard enough. It's tricky, I think, because there are definitely some habits, like strength training is something that I know is really good for me, but 10, 13 years later, it is still such a huge struggle. And I'll be really consistent, and then all of a sudden not. And it's usually because something has happened. Either I got an injury, or like life, or money because I'm working more, or like something, right? And it's just, so it is interesting, like some of these things, like I know that I feel better when I'm doing not like super heavy lifting, but when I'm doing a lot of like repetitive like strength mobility kind of training. And so it's trying to like stay in this mindset of like, this is good for me, stay consistent, without like this is the cure, and now if you're feeling bad, it's because you didn't do enough and you dropped off and you weren't consistent and blah 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 blah. So yeah, it's tricky.
Absolutely. And here's the difficulty for me with it is these things do impact us. So if our chronic illnesses were sheerly internal and nothing on our external environment impacted them, then we could just do whatever we wanted in the world and it wouldn't matter. If we could fully impact them by the environment, then we would figure out what the perfect environment or way of being is for us, and we'd put our energy into maintaining that, and that would be difficult, but you figure it out, you could do your research, and then your job is just try and maintain that as much as you can. Of course, it's a mix and match, so some things matter and some things make a difference and some things don't, and you don't always know what they are. And I'm also autistic, and I have kind of taken things very literally sometimes when I've read things, kind of go, oh gosh, okay, oh, they do that, and like when I was much younger, I'd see people like, I was bedbound and then I was running down the beach. I was going, I don't understand. I've got bone loss. My ligaments have shortened. My feet are like Barbie now, and I can't get my heels on the ground anymore because I was bedbound for so long. Like I've literally got muscle wastage. Like even if I can't stand up anymore, because even if I could stand up, like if you put me on my legs, I just collapse because I don't have the muscles to hold myself up anymore. Like I don't understand. And I realized that, people use the words in different ways, and obviously people's bodies and their ways their body responds to the illnesses are all very different. But I emailed people and I was like, I don't understand. Like, can I, like, can you kind of tell me what you did? And I would try and do it. And it didn't work for me. And then I was like, well, was it, and there was this process in the UK, which I'm not mentioning the name of because apparently they're quite litigious. And they had this thing where they said they could cure people with certain illnesses, especially like autoimmune illnesses. But it was like £2,000, and that was like 20 years ago. So £2,000 is a lot now, let alone that long ago. And but you had to sign a disclaimer before you did it, to say that if it didn't work, it was your fault because you didn't do it right. And like somebody did it and then gave me the book on it. And so you couldn't get the book unless you had done it. Right. Like it was all kind of very secret, like proprietary process.
Yeah.
And so I read the book and I'm going really upset, I said to my partner, and I was like, but this is true. The things they're saying about how my body is, we know, and my partner's going, right. But what you're not seeing, because you're very obviously understanding, very motivated right now, is that they're taking this little bit of truth and they're twisting it and they're fitting it into their narrative. So of course it resonates with you because they've used bits of your truths and then they put them into their philosophical framework, which isn't true, but it's got enough of reality in it that it chimes with you. And then you start to question your own reality. You think, well, gosh, maybe. And of course, I later found out that, of course, what they did was they put the testimonials of people who did recover on the website, and the people who didn't recover, they sued. Which, so,
Yeah. Yes.
of course,
Yeah.
there are these predatory things out there, but I did just want to acknowledge, like, what you're talking about in terms of the consistency, and it's so hard. And and I've struggled with this too. And what we talk about in the book is having an accordion routine. So this is where, so if you think, I think, have you seen an accordion, like, the instrument with the kind of ribs in it? So it's the idea that we have our ribs in our routine, we have like our kind of bones of it. And they might be as simple as like morning meds, morning hygiene, some form of movement, or like something like, or something more specific. And the idea is that when you're weller, you can expand your morning routine and kind of the accordion expands. And when you're sicker, then you shrink it and it can't, you do the bare bones of it. But I used to, struggle because I've got like where I live, I've lived here a long time now. And I kind of be like, I have learned to wheel myself up this hill and then not being able to do it so many times. This is another time I'm learning. I'm trying to be able to get myself up this hill. And I used to be able to do it and now I can't do it again. And then I realized when I spoke to non-disabled people who do running or just casually, they actually always would, because my brother runs, and I was like, actually, he's always got processes of times when he's injured or he's pulled something or times when he has to back off on his training. I was like, gosh, I've been really fantasizing this idea that if I were non-disabled, my training would be consistent. But actually, when I speak to people who train regularly, their training isn't consistent because they have, like us, they have work. They may also have pregnancy. They may also have like a house being renovated. And so instead, when I do the board work, I worked on a board which did cyber and digital. So like the kind of cyber support for hospitals and cyber security for hospitals, which is also very fascinating. Everybody wants obviously to stop there being hacking. And, like we have had hacks in the NHS and they're very scary and they're very dramatic. But, the focus has to be not just on preventing hacks, because they unfortunately will happen, but on how we get ourselves back online after it. And people don't often like that. They want to put the focus on prevention. And we can do prevention, but only to so far. And at some point you have to kind of move over.
My internet has been, it gets going out. Let me switch my hotspot real quick. I'm sorry.
Sure. Sorry, no problems.
Okay. So sorry about that. I can't remember exactly where you left off, but basically we're talking about people who are that don't have any disabilities, that don't have any health conditions, they still can be quote inconsistent because of life. And so it's good to have, if we are going to compare ourselves, let's compare ourselves fairly and thoroughly and like holistically, meaning like the whole picture. Because it's not just us that struggles with that. Our specific struggles that might prevent us from doing specific things might be different. But human to human, we all struggle with, it doesn't have to be a struggle. It's just we ebb and flow in and out of certain things depending on what's happening in our lives.
And I think so, I've experimented with, and, I've worked with people who've, some people, if they have a menstrual cycle, really like to kind of work with their well-being practices or their movement practices alongside a menstrual cycle. Some people might like to do it with seasons. And like we often do have to change with the seasons. Like if I'm exercising outside, I have to change it. Like I can't go early in the morning in the winter because it's too dark. And it's not safe for me to be outside alone. So there's always going to be changes, even, and this isn't to say that, oh, if you're chronically ill, it's fine. Everyone has problems because, of course, people have like night, and then I have night and disability. But I was having this idea that like, oh, they can just train. There's no inconsistency, and instead, to me, it's how I navigate inconsistency, how I have something which is flexible enough, is able to kind of grow and shrink, is able to get back online, and how I will, and also what my recovery protocols are like. So when I get knocked off track, what's my process for how I then attend to that? Do I take a conscious break? Do I attend to it quickly and go like, right, we've missed one day, but we're going to keep momentum and we're going to go back to the gentlest practice available, but we are going to go back? Do I use it as an opportunity to take a look back at my healing roadmap and say, well, actually, we've had a bit of a rupture here in the schedule. Is this a good time to do an extra review to see, am I going to go back to the same thing, or am I going to tweak it or go back to something that fits a bit more, looking around at the seasonal way, how am I right now? Do I actually need to tweak it in this moment?
Yeah, I love that so much. The accordion is such a great imagery for what we're talking about. The more and more I just like scaled back everything I was doing health wise, like supplements to routines to, and like I just kind of come back to the basics, the better I feel almost every time. So it's so interesting. We think we have to do all of these things, and usually, whether that's because those extra things cause stress and then maybe that's counteracting what we're doing, or maybe they just really weren't that important to begin with, but we were sold a lie. Like, who knows? All I do know is that like I take 2 to 4 Epsom salt baths a week, and without that I'm miserable. And that I drink a lot of water and I take my prescribed medications, and that's it. That's all I do these days. That's it.
I think there's, for me at least, I've experienced myself and with others, that there's a giving up of a release or surrender of control around this, because, when I was kind of very in like I was kind of, wellness blogging in the UK as one of kind of the first wellness bloggers. And, it was kind of very fashionable to like, talk about what you were doing, etc. And I can remember the one day kind of I had a big pile of healing books. I was almost intimidated by them because there was so many activities that I was supposed to be doing in them, and that I had to do all of them, of course. I had to do them right to justify the cost of the book. And, I realized that actually what was happening was I was trying to be in movement, in action all the time. So I didn't have to sit with the fear and the reality of my latest diagnosis, because I was doing things that felt like they were actions, they were making a difference, they were getting me towards something, rather than actually going, wow, I've got a really serious diagnosis, I'm pretty scared about it. I have some processing to do with that.
Exactly.
So I think it's sometimes easier to release things when we're doing the emotional work alongside it, because often the things we're doing them for a reason, and sometimes we're doing them as a way to navigate our emotions, or to give ourselves a distraction from them, to kind of regulate ourselves to some extent.
Yeah. This has been so helpful and such a great episode. Your book is out already, right? It can be.
It is, and it's got like a whole range of freebies for people who buy. So we've got like waiting room meditations, which you can listen to in the waiting room. We've got, which I'm really excited about, we've got these procedural piece audios. So it's me talking you through all the different procedures, like getting a blood draw or an MRI or a CT or a gynae exam or a dental appointment. And in each one, I'm teaching a different technique to kind of help regulate your emotions and your kind of capacity in that. And then we've got the post-appointment support sessions. So we've got how you listen to it. It's like a little debrief after your appointment. So it's like, what if I've had a good news that I didn't know I wasn't ready for that? What if I've had bad news? What if I've experienced medical racism or dismissal or disbelief or, anti-trans or biphobia, whatever it's kind of prejudice, how we kind of process that. And then, of course, in my newsletter, I've got the pre-appointment pep talks, which is 10 days of me talking you through. Before I wanted it to be an app, so you could put the date of your appointment in, and then you'd get messages every day. But apparently that costs $25,000. So we don't. We've got an email system. So you get these little audios every day, and they're talking you through prepping for your appointment. So if you've got a scary appointment on the calendar, I will talk you through both taking care of yourself before it and how to actually prep for it.
That's amazing. I didn't even know that before we got on this call. And I think that it would have been, that's that's amazing. And those are your freebies?
They're all my freebies.
So that's, what's your website?
So my website is my name, gracequantock.com.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, good. Thank you so much, Grace, for doing this work. I can see also why you've been working on it since 2011, because clearly it is like very thorough and you've thought a lot about it, and you clearly have a lot of life experience, and it's going to help a lot of people. So I'm so glad to help get the word out about your book. I'm looking forward to going through it myself and help and encouraging clients to look through it too.
Thank you so much. It's been such a delightful conversation. I'm so happy, and I'm so happy to, obviously find you and your work and all you're doing here. And thank you to all listeners. I'm just so glad you're here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you.
Thanks, Grace. All right, I will.
Thanks for listening. If you learned something new today, consider writing it down in your phone notes or journal and make that new neural pathway light up. Better yet, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram, email me, or leave a voice memo for us to play on the next show. The way you summarize your takeaways can be the perfect little soundbite that someone else might need. And lastly, leaving a review really helps others find this podcast, so please do if you found this episode helpful. And P.S., clicking subscribe ensures you'll be here for the next episode. See you then!